Welcome everyone to today's webinar on one-to-one social engagement. Over the next 50 minutes we'll be discussing how to use social media to drive authentic and meaningful engagement with your customers. I'm Aaron Jackson, I'll be your host for today's webinar. Here at the Incite Group, our mantra is brands living from brands, and I'm really delighted to be joined by three great brands today working in three very different industries. So firstly, we have James Royer. He's the Director of Digital Media and Strategy at the Kansas City Chiefs. We also have Heather Taylor, who's Director of Creative Strategy for The Economist, and also Dave Savoy, who's Director of Digital Marketing and Strategy at Farmers Insurance. So as I said, three very different industries. Now before we get started with today's discussion, I just wanted to remind you that we're recording the webinar. We will be sending out audio recordings next week, so don't worry if you miss anything, you will have a chance to listen back. The webinar is also very much interactive. We had over 1,100 people signed up today, and we want to utilise you, and there'll be a number of anonymous polls taking place throughout the discussion, and I also urge you to type any of your own questions into the chat box. I'll be sure to incorporate these into the discussion throughout the webinar. We're also using the hashtag CSMNY today. That stands for the Corporate Social Media Summit New York, and you can see it on the right of your slide. So again, any questions or thoughts, feel free to tweet away. So yeah, I thought a nice start to the webinar today would be to start with a poll for our audience and get a bit of a gauge of who's out there. So it should be coming onto your screens now is the first poll, and that is, to what extent do you feel your company is using social media to engage customers on a truly one-to-one basis? So I'll give you around about 15 seconds to answer this, and you can only select one answer. So the first answer is very effectively. Are you just effectively? If you got significant improvement, sorry, do you need to improve, or do you have significant improvement? So just leave that open for a little bit more. I can see all the results are coming in. And going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1. So that's now closed, and the results should be coming up on your screen. So I guess perhaps surprisingly, over 50% of you think you require improvement in how you engage with your customers on a truly one-to-one basis. I guess there's always room for improvement, so perhaps not too surprising. James, I'm going to come to you first. Is this surprising to you? How many people out there think they need to improve how they're engaging with their customers?
Well, thanks of all for having me, Aaron. And no, it doesn't. I think there's a lot of opportunity for really understanding our customers, their customer journey. How do we use different technologies for listening and to engage and align those touch points within the organization's business objectives? So I think there's a lot of pieces that go into this, and it's all interconnected, and it starts with a philosophy. It's carried through with really understanding not only how to talk to your customers, but the best distribution channels with which to talk to them and how they want to be talked to. So I definitely am not surprised by this answer at all.
Okay. And Dave, do you feel the same, or what are your thoughts on this?
No, I absolutely feel the same way. I mean, as you put it, there's always room for improvement, but I mean, it speaks to some of the difficulty in actually activating personalized social media campaigns. I mean, it's one thing to have the strategy and have the idea in your mind of who the customer is that you'd like to reach out to, and even what sort of message and timing you want to do so. But some of the technology challenges, I think, in actually activating those campaigns are definitely longer-term things.
Okay, and then Heather, coming to you. Obviously, there's 4% of people are doing this very effectively. Where do you think you are at the Economist? Where would you put yourself? I guess to put you on the spot.
Like, that's not fair. You didn't ask anyone else that. No, I think when I actually reached out, I was talking to all the parts of our social team, because we have very different parts of the business that look at social media and look at communication, and I think they really put themselves at being efficient, but still, I mean, we all have room for improvement. I think one of the big things is going to be, do we have the right people doing these jobs and thinking about this one-on-one communication? If we're looking towards into the realm of like customer service, which I think a lot of this kind of sits in at the moment and is continuing to shift, but you need to train staff differently. You need to look at like, what can we automate and still create a one-on-one experience, and then at what point do we have to have that human intervention? So I think that's probably why people are looking, saying that they need improvement is required, because not just technology, but how people are being utilized, how we are actually thinking about this needs to change.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's definitely a challenge knowing what you can automate, or I guess what you can get away with automating, and still seem, engaging and personable, and what needs that kind of human touch. I guess to some extent, one-to-one marketing and engagement is a bit buzzwordy. In your experience, what actually separates one brand which is actually engaging their customers on a personal level, and another brand which maybe is still in that improvement required section? Dave, I'll come to you first on that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah. So I guess it kind of builds on what I was leaning towards before, which is, I mean, first, obviously, you have to have a very clear idea of who it is you want to connect with, why, what you want to say to those individuals, and then the timing of it, how frequently you want to connect. So you have to have your communications plan and strategy fully baked before you then can activate it. But I think that's really the biggest challenge, right? It's being able to implement the technologies. So, I mean, as you all know, you can see I come from the insurance industry, which is something of a slow to adopt newer technologies, and we're definitely coming around. But having legacy systems makes it very challenging for us to, turn on a dime, so to speak, and implement content automation or personalization platforms. So there's definitely infrastructure, and I think that's a huge part of it. But it really is one of those things that's easy to say and hard to do, and the reasons for that vary, but no one's kind of figured out the secret code, right, to go from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds flat.
Sure, sure. And well, I guess if there's anyone out there that does have that secret code, please do message in, and we'll get you on for another webinar. But I'd be very surprised. And Heather, is that kind of a similar feeling for you? Is infrastructure one of the big things that separates a brand that is really engaging on a personal level, and a brand that's still improving?
I'm going to go towards, I think, a little bit more about information. So, of course, infrastructure you need to have, and especially baking to your strategy, but there is an understanding of like what data you have and what data you can collect. So how do you, build all those demographics and behavioral insight against the reader? So it's fine to say we have this information, but I guess using technology and infrastructure to try to pair them and pair that information is important. I think also depends on your industry. So we are under really strict data laws because we follow the strictest data laws in the world because we're a global organization. So we look at what we can do in terms of data protection laws in France because they are the strictest. And so we have to be careful with how personalized we can get because of those regulations. We can't always attribute things to an individual, but we can attribute to people of like types. So how do we, that's the challenge that we face, is like how do we get to be as personalized as possible without basically ruining anyone's privacy. And so I think we have to continue to think about that because it can get a little creepy, and we want to make sure that we're not creepy, but yet we're as efficient and as relevant as possible.
Yeah, that's definitely always a challenge, not being too creepy but still being personable. I think there's a very thin line. And yeah, what you said about data laws and regulation as well, I'm sure that's something the other panelists experience as well. I know, Dave, insurance being a heavily regulated industry, and James, I'm sure you have some challenges as well based on the wider NFL and kind of the rules they set. But James, coming to you, for you, what separates a brand that's personal and engaging on a one-to-one way and a brand that still needs to improve?
Well, I'll build off of what Heather said a little bit. I liked how she said that. You have to, you can't get to that point where you're basically saying, hey, hey, Joe, do you want the same thing you got every game? You don't want to do that obviously as a part of what we're doing. But I think the next step, kind of what goes to that is having that data, having that intelligence, but then making it actionable and having a format you can read it and say, okay, this is how we can use this data and how we can improve either our processes or our communications to those key audiences. And I think that's really where it goes. I was actually at a conference earlier this week that was specific to the sports industry, and they asked us what's the future, how we generate revenue, as a sports franchise. And my answer was the same thing, having that actionable intelligence that really allows us to be focused in our targeting. So the days of the scattershot are definitely gone, but how are you really reaching those audiences that are really have affinity for that product specifically? And I think that's really the next step in the process and that's where everybody's still working towards, right? That's why we're having this discussion today, is because we haven't figured it out. But we're trying to work towards how do we really get smart about, okay, this segment of our population or our audience, needs to have this information, a different segment. And sports is kind of a different industry in that we have a lot of different audiences. We have what we call our season ticket members, and we have our single game ticket members, and then we have what we call casual fans. And we kind of look at really look at a fandom ladder is what we kind of say, is they have different levels of affinity, different levels of loyalty, and how do you talk to where they're at, but how do you also try to influence them to go to the next step? And that really requires some really actionable data.
Yeah, I can imagine so, and I guess the challenge there as well is being personal and taking some that next level without being too sales focused or too selly when you come across on the phone. So I mean, there's been some great content so far, and it's been a really interesting discussion. Knowing how you guys do this, but I'm interested to kind of take it back a little bit, and for brands and people listening that might not be quite as far down the line as you guys, I'm interested to hear kind of what are the first steps if you were kind of starting a new brand. What would be the kind of the first steps you'd take in moving from, I guess, quite broad demographic-based marketing to having this kind of individual conversations with customers, and kind of what role does social play in that? So I guess, Dave, I'll come to you first on that one.
Yeah, so it's actually a fairly relevant question. I mean, relevant to my experience. So working primarily on our life insurance line of business. So we started up digital marketing efforts a few years ago, whereby we launched a department, and there really had been no sort of direct-to-consumer communications prior to that time. We had mainly worked through our agent base to get the word out that farmers offers multiple lines of business and basically use them as the storefront, the sales team. But anyway, so building the team here, I mean, we first had to figure out who it is we wanted to connect with, and taking a relatively high-level persona version of our current customer base, figuring out the target market, what kind of messages, and then how to engage them. So it took us a while to kind of crack the nut in terms of what sort of content they wanted to see and how they wanted to have it delivered. Social has been a huge boost for us to engage with our current customer base and drive retention, which is actually a huge focus for us, even more so than growth or acquisition at this point. So, I mean, the first thing you have to do is know that customer, right? I mean, that's the old axiom, and then figure out what it is and how they want to connect with you, what it is they want to know and how they want to connect with you. One of the big things that we've done in terms of social and personalized content, steps towards that, was figure out, what sort of a hook we could present to a person across Facebook or Twitter or what have you, and then feed them deeper information on the site, where for us we could better track, what their interests are based on their browsing history and so on and so forth, but better for the customer also, in that we could sort of personalize or tailor the experience that they saw, when they came to the site, based on the ad that they were engaging with, and then some of the other information, customer information that we have about them. So it's kind of a long answer, but I think it comes back to know the customer is definitely step number one.
Okay. Yeah, I think it sounds so simple now you say it, starting with your customer, working out what they want and testing, how you should be speaking to them, what's going to react best. And I guess, Heather, coming to you, is that the similar approach to you take? Would you start with the customer and work out exactly what's going to work and then start implementing a strategy? How would you approach this?
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. I think for us, we have a number of different types of audiences, so it's really understanding how they work across. Like I know, just like Dave said, across lines of business, for us it's across different kind of intentions. So we have a huge base of social followers. I think there's like 3 million or plus on Facebook, but not all of those people who follow us on Facebook are also, or on any kind of social platform, are necessarily purchasing the magazine or have a subscription. So we have a whole circulation base, and then we also have custom content programs that we do for our clients. So we work with brands to do custom client programs. So we have all of this information about our audience, but they're all in different places. So really for us, we're working to find ways of where are those overlaps so that we can learn more about the customer, exactly kind of what Dave was saying, to understand those customers so that we can give them the right information. And in some cases, create the right content. Our editorial won't necessarily be influenced by that, but it will influence what we may put out in social, what we communicate with. And in order for us to get to more of that one-on-one approach, what we're really doing is looking at, now that as we continue to understand the customer more, how do we retarget on social, engage individual leaders around the content that we know that they're interested in? So really it's about surfacing information, surfacing content, making things more relevant, more contextual to the world that they're in right now. So we're not going to chase headlines. That's not what we do at The Economist, but what we were going to do is put the news in context. So by making sure that we can target them in that way, so utilizing usually pixels and custom audience pools, we can start to feel like a more catered experience in terms of the information you're consuming, versus us just doing kind of a broad distribution. And so that's how we're looking at getting to more of a one-on-one type feel, even though it's not necessarily down to a single individual. It's down to like a pool of which parts are most relevant to you.
Okay. And James, coming to you on the same question about where you'd start kind of down the line. So far we've had, I guess, mapping out your audience and finding out what works, and then also looking at the content that they digest and what's going to be most contextually relevant. What do you have to add to that?
Well, again, Heather, I think you summed it up perfectly in the statement around context. I mean, that's a powerful statement, and I applaud that, because I think that's, we fail to look at it sometimes, is the context. How do we set context? How do we make it relevant? And it's not always, we make it sound like it's a grander scale than it needs to be sometimes. But it's just, maybe it's when we're writing a tweet or like, how are you setting off that, hey, we're at this event and then we're going to try to tie it into this, what's happening in the world. I think that's very powerful. I think as we look at audiences, and I try to look at things that may be applicable to this audience in a different format, but we look at our audiences and we have a very strong segment in our audience of fantasy football players. And fantasy football players want to know injury updates. And when we are trying to put content out there that are talking to injury updates, we tend to think about, hey, is this something that a fantasy user is going to want to interact with? Whereas a season ticket member may be totally different user behavior. And I think sometimes we ask. I was actually in a situation where with the Tampa Bay Lightning, my previous employer, where we had season ticket memberships, and we asked each group of season ticket members, we kind of realized they all have different motivations for buying season tickets. So what are those motivations? And some of them was it's a family activity. They want to go out there and spend time with their family. Other people, it's social interactions. They want to hang out with other people that are like-minded and they may not have families. And other people, it may be business-related. They want to use it for networking or to take prospects. So we asked them, what do you guys want the most out of? And then we started targeting our communications and even some events and some touch points around what their motivations were. So for as a business person, hey, how do we help you support when you're bringing that client to a game? Or if it's a family event, how do we get you interacting with our mascot? Or how do we get our mascot in front of you if that's what's really important to you? So sometimes we have to ask as well.
Okay, that's an interesting approach. And I guess kind of my next question, actually I'd just like to give let you guys know that thanks for letting all the questions come in. I wanted to, I guess, first go to some questions from Curtis Kitchen. And he's asked a couple of questions, but I guess summarize them. He's asking about, do you think consumers are getting a bit too savvy now for any sales speak? And are we at the point where we really need content to kind of speak for itself and I guess kind of do the selling of a product as opposed to kind of the adverts? So using that content to drive sales rather than having kind of hard adverts. So he's asked those questions, and I want to kind of add on to that. What sort of specific KPIs and goals do you have internally? I mean, how do you judge the success? Is it going to be hard sales at the end? That's what you used to judge success, or is it just how much engagement a piece of content generates? So yeah, really looking to hear your thoughts on content versus kind of hard selling over social, and also kind of what success looks like to your brand. So Heather, coming to you first.
Yes, that's a great question, because I think I'm a huge believer, I mean, as I hope everyone is, that it's really not about the hard sale. That's never going to win it for you. So I work with, so as being the creative strategist, I'm working with all of the brands that come to us to look for those content solutions. And how do we get more granular and we have to get to quite granular audiences a lot of the time. So people will be turned away. Well, like, you would be turned away. I try to think of this like, I look at something, I know when they're doing a hard sale. And I think a lot of the times we mix up our KPIs and think, you know, we want to, let's say, have broad awareness, or let's say we want to have a brand perception shift utilizing our content, yet we measure it on sales. So I think what we have to do is really understand, like, how do people warm up to you as an organization? How do you penetrate? And then at what point is it okay to go to that deeper level of something that's maybe more product-based? But I think you have to kind of go to that higher level first, even in a personalized, you know, one-to-one fashion. I think then that's what you can determine your KPIs. Like when we're looking at our ourselves, like I'm just trying to put in the shoes of our circulation team, because that kind of will lead to more sales type elements. They don't do a hard sale right away either. It's about retargeting or targeting people with content. So we've started to do specialized like flip books that we can send to people with relevant articles from the Economist to make them more intrigued in what we do as an organization, in topic areas that we are seeing that they're interested in by, you know, what they're consuming on their site. So they get something a little more tailored, something tailored to the area that they want to engage with, and then we can look at, you know, are people good engaging with that, number one, but then also are they going to then we're going to look at things like subscriptions and registrations after that. But engagement is always first. So making compelling content that is relevant is going to trump anything else that you do.
Okay. And James, coming to you, is that how you look at it? Is it, you know, how engaging a piece of content is, and this engagement coming first, or at the end of the day, you know, is your boss going to come to you and be like, "Where's how many, you know, season ticket holders have we retained? What do the metrics look like on your side?"
Well, we do look at that, season ticket retention rates. That's an industry standard. But I think it comes down to, we got to know who we are as a brand. And with the Kansas City Chiefs, we are, you know, we're not one of the biggest markets in the NFL, and we don't have the history of other organizations that, you know, have been continually had success over the years. And, you know, we're on the upswing in many ways, but it comes down to understanding kind of where we are as an organization. We're not going to compete with the Dallas Cowboys in audience size. Where we can compete with any NFL team, we have consistently, is engagement rate. And we look at engagement in several different ways. So it's engagements not only by overall engagement rates, but engagement by users and engagement by posts. So we want to understand, how are we getting the content out there that's best going to resonate with our audiences? Because if it's not resonating with our audiences, the compelling question is, should we do it? And I think that's a part of the context, the relevancy, you know, equation, is really understanding what those are. But for us, engagement unlocks a lot of other aspects of things. If we can get them engaged on a regular basis, that obviously means in the Facebook's environment that more people are going to see our content on a regular basis. That's important to us, because we're going to try to do, it's kind of what Heather was saying a little bit in regards to, we want to build the relationship before we make the ask. So we want to earn the right to market to our customers. We want to give them something of value that's going to provide something to them before we're going to act on it. And it's really a value statement once we get to that ask. And we strategically mix that into what we're doing across the board, whether that be, hey, you need to be at the game, and we're going to be subtle with it, but we'll create, you know, imagery that shows fans, that shows them interacting with our players and thinking like, yeah, you can picture yourself in the psychology part of it. You can picture yourself there. You can picture yourself cheering on and being at a game. And that's important, because we're making them the hero of the marketing. It's not about us, but it's about them. So I think there's, you know, it comes to really KPIs. Having that engagement, even going to our website, is going to open up more opportunities for them to then see product offerings, whether that be merchandise, whether that be ticket sales, whatever, things of that nature. We're going to see that. And we're going to track intent then too. And like any good you know, consumer packaged good, we're going to track intent. What's the intent of them buying that product? And we're going to see that where they are in the sales funnel. And is it a surfacey relationship, or is it a deep relationship where they're coming back on a regular basis? You know, have they downloaded our mobile app and they're interacting with the mobile app? That's a higher level of engagement than just coming to our website. So I think we look at it a lot of different ways. You know, I think I have the challenge that many of you have, is that we were just recently counting down the different data sources that we have. We have 19 different sources of data coming into our digital department. And how do we utilize all that to really understand what the most important metrics are? We're like a lot of organizations out there. We're not a big staff. We don't have, you know, tens and 20s of people, we have a very small task. So we have to really focus on what's the most important thing and what's the biggest thing we can be trying to accomplish at this moment within the context.
Okay, great. And Dave, coming to you finally, do you have anything to add on what success looks like at Farmers Insurance?
Yes, and I'll make it quick. So I first want to address the first part of the question, which is, are users sort of getting fatigued by the hard sale on social? And I think they are. I mean, as evidenced by some of the metrics that we've been able to gather over the time that I've been here. There's kind of a banner blindness and ad blindness when you're scrolling down your news feed in Facebook, let's say. You sort of subconsciously skip over these things that look like they're just trying to sell you something. So, which is really, doesn't really. It's something we've learned from, but it isn't exactly our strategy. So we haven't been dogged by that too much. Instead, what we're trying to figure out is how we can engage with users as part of a process, as part of similar to what James was just talking about, kind of a nurture stream. Right? So how can we sort of facilitate the consumer along their journey to learn about insurance, whatever type of insurance they're looking for, life insurance, home insurance, what have you, and then figuring out at what point do we present them with the right offer, right? Be it mortgage coverage or protecting your family with life insurance. What is the value proposition given the nurture stream that they've gone down that's going to best encourage them to quote and get a policy with us. And then so we're testing that on an ongoing basis. So there's a lot of different things going on. From a KPI perspective, KPI standpoint, you have to, so I think Heather said it earlier, you have to have data, obviously, but then it's quite a challenge to know which bits of data to be looking at in order to evaluate the success of whatever program. And I don't think that you can just, pluck out a single post out of our nurture stream and say, well, this post got X number of engagements and led to X number of sessions and so on, and then evaluate that standalone, whether it was successful or not. Because these pieces all need to fit together. And at the end of the day, it is going to be measured by the net result that you're going for. Either you're increasing your sales revenue or you're retaining, customers to have a sales stream, a revenue stream moving forward. And so the degree to which these individual pieces influence those bottom line numbers, I think is what you really need to be looking at. Although we do obviously track all these things in between, how many people are viewing our content and what's the engagement rate and where the comments coming in, but it's just part of a bigger picture.
Can I add one thing actually to this, if that's okay? I know I had my go, but I do think there's, to the first point, there is a lot about, I think we have to think about a value exchange. I think we just think if we give people information, no matter what it is, that they're going to engage with it, but really it's about what value are we giving to that person and what value is this experience, because we're expecting them to give us value by not only giving us their time, but eventually giving us their money. And so we really have to look at that, and there's, it just, as James was talking, it made me think of some research. We just did some research called TL Disrupted, and there's some facts in it that I think are really relevant to this conversation where, the rewards are really big for people who are getting it right in terms of that value exchange, in terms of having that compelling content. And we often are looking at thought leadership specifically, but I'll give you 3 quick facts. So 76% of senior executives are influenced in their purchasing decision if that content is right. 67% are willing to advocate for that brand or organization externally if you get that content right and then engage it right, and 83% are influenced in their choice of business partner. So if you kind of think about that, that's the part that's key, and you're right, saying that we are often too product focused, often too sales focused, but if we understand that we give that value first and we can draw them in to the environment by giving them that value, that we can get so many good rewards. And I think we forget that because we're so concerned about that sale that we forget that why they even want to come to us in the first place and what our value as a brand is.
Okay. So though I guess kind of the biggest KPI in the end is kind of your net results, really for that sales message, timing is everything. It's giving them that value first and kind of letting them prove themselves to you that they need that sales message and kind of that you've given them enough value and you're going to be relevant to them. And then once they've kind of led themselves down that channel, that's when the timing's right for the sales message. One other question which I want to bring up, which has come through multiple times in the chat, as Stephanie's asked it, we've got Layla asking it as well as a few others, is about the importance of video content in your strategy. So it's a little bit of a sidestep on the main topic, but as some people have asked for it, I wanted to ask it anyway. So how important is video to your strategy? And also a little add-on for James that's specifically been asked is to do with the restrictions that you face as being an American football team placed on you by the NFL and kind of how quickly you can get kind of in-game content. So, James, I'll come to you first about how much does video play, how much a role does video play in your strategy?
Video is huge. That's been something in my 2 years here with the team has been, hey, let's put more focus on how do we distribute our content. We're very fortunate to have a phenomenal video production team here that goes by the name of 65 TPT or 65 Tosh Power Trap Productions. There's a story behind that name. It's iconic. I won't get into that today, but they were producing all this content for different distribution channels. And we kind of said, okay, how do we make this content relevant, contextual within our video strategy, understanding the kind of values that Facebook plays on that. And even Instagram, we saw a tremendous increase in video views on Instagram over the course of really from when they launched their analytics in late July, August to into January, and just saw some of the videos. We've had videos that we placed on Instagram, the same video we placed on Facebook, get almost 3 times more views on Instagram as opposed to the other platforms. So we think that's very important because it captures that emotion, it captures that essence of what it's like to be around the team or whatever that moment is. Even things like 360 videos where we put it on the field as we're going through our pregame rituals of having the pyro go off and the players are introduced. That puts somebody in that moment, and it's just incredibly powerful. And it allows, obviously in Facebook's environment, it really greases the wheels for your other content to get more reach, more impact. So that's been incredibly important for us. To answer the question in regards to the NFL's social media policies, I think that's a great question. I think there's obviously a lot of things that were reported. I'll say it this way, in that the NFL has been very receptive to the feedback that the clubs have provided to it, and we've actually been very collaborative in opening the doors up for a lot more video usage. It kind of was reported, and it kind of was very restrictive at the time it was being reported, but we were able to very nimbly shift, and at this point in time, for Twitter specifically, because the league has a league-wide deal with Twitter, we're able to put out highlights relatively quickly within a matter of, I would say, probably a minute of getting that play to happen. If one of our players is scoring a touchdown, we'll have that. We'll tweet that out pretty quickly. And then there's other opportunities, obviously, within different platforms. And I think the one that we're really cracking and really seeing just positive results is the Facebook Live strategies. And I'm not talking about just making something that it's really giving fans access that they've never had before, and they just love that aspect of it. So what can we do more around that side of things is really kind of the next evolution of the process. So I hope that answers the questions in regards to the social strategy and kind of how we play with video, but it is very important.
Okay, yeah, that's great. You've definitely answered the questions I had there. So, Dave, coming to you next. How are you using video?
So, absolutely, video is crucial, especially if you're trying to explain a complex topic like some of the insurance products that we offer. Being able to do so in a quick and a way that doesn't put a lot of burden on the customer to read lots of text or even interact with an infographic that requires some sort of a deeper level of engagement where they can get some information, and then hopefully, we can deliver in that vehicle a bit about farmers' value proposition and why you'd want to do business with farmers beyond the product details itself. We can deliver that in the tone of voice, in the imagery that we use in the video. So video is absolutely crucial for explaining this type of product. I think one of the challenges that we're facing, if I can just take a quick kind of tangent, is how we use the video. So you have the same sort of content cut for different platforms. Maybe a teaser, a 5-second teaser that we'll place in stream, like in Facebook, and then we have a longer version that we place on our site, and then we'd have maybe even a full version on a dedicated landing page if somebody wants to see, you know, a case study or something like that. So there are a lot of different flavors to video, is what I'm trying to say, but it's absolutely crucial because it takes the burden off the customer of, you know, self-directed research, and then gives us a voice, a platform for delivering the message in sort of the way that we believe is going to connect best with the consumer and with our brand.
Okay, and before we move on to Heather, I guess to follow up on that, what sort of regulations do you find, Dave? Obviously working in insurance, I'm sure there's plenty of rules and regulations you have to stick to with video content. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, no, I could talk about those all day. So we have, it's a very highly regulated industry, so we need to be very careful about how we refer to products and what they can and can't do for the customer's needs. So we have a very rigorous legal and advertising compliance department that all of our content must flow through, and it takes us a while to create. So I mean, it's a long lead time process for us to get video out the door. So it's really on the marketing team to be forward thinking in terms of what sort of content we want to produce over the next quarter or the next year even, and then get that process started ASAP, because you know, we need to account for the time it's going to take to actually get that stuff out the door. Yeah, and then there are all sorts of form numbers and disclaimers that we need to place. So it's a challenge, to be sure.
I can imagine. And Heather, coming to you, I'd be very surprised if The Economist isn't using video content, but if you could talk us a little bit through your strategy, that'd be great.
Of course, we're using a lot of video content. We actually have, so we have a group with, or part of The Economist is Economist Films. So we actually are creating documentary series directly for Facebook as actually our primary audience, which is, and it's really funny because we have, a lot of our documentaries are longer and they're getting great engagement. So they're, you know, 8 to 10 minutes and people are engaging with it. What's funny is that Facebook said they're going for a longer form video strategy, which means over 2 minutes, which made me laugh because we're doing much more than that and still getting great engagement. I think one of the things, and we also have, sorry to interrupt my own self, but we also have a new product called Daily Watch, which is part of our Espresso. So every morning someone gets the news in app, and they also get video content. So short form, like what's happening today, or you know, parts of the documentaries that we are creating. The same thing with our clients that we work with in terms of the custom content programs. We're getting a lot of the same, like we're getting a lot of engagement with video, and we're finding that it's more and more important to not only our brands, but also to, you know, the programs that we build. So we did something for Microsoft, we had an interactive video, more than 50% completion rate of an 8-minute experience. And then we just launched something with Porsche, same thing, we were having a 90% completion rate because the content is good and it's not overly salesy, it's very editorially driven. The one thing that I think was interesting that we try to always balance and look at is when someone looks at a piece of content and engages with that video content, they are going to engage with it there, and they most likely won't go somewhere else to complete a video experience. So a lot of the times if we want someone to have a longer video experience, let's say on site, we utilize more traffic drivers, or here's like a bold image, something that makes people click through to the video. So we try to build whatever video we have, wherever we have it, is what we expect that experience to be. So that little teaser, 30-second, may be the only thing that they'll watch. So we're always trying to be aware of, like, where do we want the engagement, where do we want to take them, and that's really a big part of the strategy when we're looking at programs in terms of success. A lot of times we put things into our site or into social, and that's where we expect the engagement to lie. And we're not afraid to have that longer content because we're finding more and more success with it, especially editorially.
Okay, and I guess I don't want to ask you about the regulation question, but I do have a slightly different question for you. Obviously you have content for your paid subscribers, and you have other content that you use in your marketing. How do you decide? Is it kind of a battle internally for which content you can use for, I guess, free content for marketing, and which content is kind of held back for your paid subscribers?
I don't have purview to like all of the decisions in terms of which content we use. But anything that we use and create for social, let's say all of our documentary content for Economist Films is all free. It's not subscription-based. So only the things that are within the publication itself. And we choose things that are most relevant. So the social team will often be like, well, what are the things we need to talk about today? What can we open up? to enable that conversation. So they're in constant conversation with the editorial team because they kind of sit in the social world and half with the editorial team because they are editors themselves. So for them, it's really about making sure the things that are public are the things that are most relevant to people now and that will be most enticing to get people to engage with the publication, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure, sure. And I want to get on to another question actually that's just come in from Kelly Rose that I find quite interesting. And I don't want to get into, I guess, a big debate or discussion around kind of the various tools and vendors that are out there. But Kelly's question is, how have content management and social listening tools changed your strategies? So, I mean, if your strategies change depending on kind of what software you have access to, and yeah, I guess which pieces of software to some extent have changed your strategy. Dave, I'll come to you first on that one. Has there ever been a new piece of software that you've come across and thought, oh, that's great, I'm going to kind of change a big chunk of our strategy based around that software? And if so, kind of what precautions and things do you look at when you're kind of deciding to adopt a new piece of technology?
So I wish that were the case. I mean, I wish I could say that we had some new technology that we were able to roll out and then that would make a dramatic shift in our strategy. And we're working to onboard our current customer data via LiveRamp. So, again, kind of playing catch up in terms of the marketing suites that are available. And it's starting to make some shifts in how we present content to consumers and exactly, how and what and when that gets delivered. But I can't think of other than that, an example of where we had to basically stop on a dime and pivot 180 degrees and go a different direction. It's just, I think what would probably facilitate or instigate that rather is if the tool that you onboarded gave you some new insight or some deeper insight into your current customer base or the target customer segment that you didn't have before, like day parting analysis or platform analysis, customer journey, sort of deeper level persona type of information that shows where you should be connecting and at what times of the day, what days of the week, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I mean, I would love for that to have happened, and we'll get there someday. But
Sure. I think we're all waiting for that magic piece of technology that gives us the single customer view. Heather, coming to you, is there any piece of technology that have changed your strategy at all?
Well, we're actually working with a company called People Pattern at the moment to look at our audience development. They use machine learning and natural language processors to look at like the semi-structured social data and start to look at how what people are really talking about and what are their relevant interests outside of like they may be talking about one certain thing, but then you can start to track through all of their conversations and start to parse them into these kind of audience pools, as I was talking about before, but in a way to like not just, it kind of removes the silo between like, let's say the information that we have as an audience that we know about a specific group of audience that we have versus the things that they're talking about outside of our purview. And it's been really interesting because you start to see connections where you've never seen connections before, and you start to see interest areas that you may not realize are there that go beyond any kind of social listening platform that I've seen before, where I feel like that's more like, oh, here's number of engagements and here's the number of followers and all this information that you feel like it's not really relevant, doesn't necessarily help me. But something like this tool and like utilizing artificial intelligence to help help it learn and figure out more and more about your customer has been, I think, a little bit of a game changer in terms of how I think we're going to move forward on how we engage with our audiences.
Sure, and I think there's a lot more to come on artificial intelligence. It's definitely a really interesting area. And James, coming to you, has there been any pieces of software that have really changed your approach to the Chiefs?
Well, I think Heather and Dave kind of have summarized everything in that regard. I think that I always go back to, if you spend any time around me or you hear me talk, I always go back to what was, and the first time I ever saw it was in the book Groundswell, which was written about 10 years ago, but just really encapsulates kind of the digital and social kind of movement. But they always start with what they call the POST acronym, and that's people first, objective second, strategy third, and then tools fourth. And if you're putting tools before people and objectives, I think you're kind of getting things out of line there. So I try to use, obviously, understanding what we're trying to use going into it and what we're trying to accomplish and who we're trying to talk to. And this obviously, this this discussion's about one-to-one social media engagement, it's really about people we talk to. And I think it's really, if you understand who you're trying to talk to, what your objectives are, it's more how do you support those with the tools. And it's really about the data. And I think what was interesting about the NFL and kind of environmental ordinance, we get a report card every week. How do we compare against other teams? And obviously we're in a very competitive environment in that there's only 32 teams, and we're going to be competitive against 32 teams in every aspect, on the field, off the field, anything we do. So when we're not competitive in those numbers, we're looking at how do we change that. And having that constant feedback in the tools that we are provided does help tremendously. We have a case study where where those rankings look at, like we were ranked consistently in Instagram the first 11 weeks of the season. We were ranked 22nd, average over 22nd a week, which is just unacceptable for what we want to accomplish. Over the last 11 weeks of the season, it was an average rank of 8. So we were able to use some of those intelligence and data to really understand, to shift our philosophy and really increase our engagement rate, because again, it goes back to what I said earlier, if you're not engaging your audience in that platform, are you really doing it the right way? So we were very strategic in how we approach that. But again, I think overarching idea is that tools are going to help support what you do, but I think you really just understand with the people you're trying to reach and your objectives first and foremost.
Okay, great. Sorry, I was having a problem with unmuting then. But that's really interesting. So I think benchmarking's a real challenge for most people, and so it's really interesting to hear you get that report card each week. And yeah, that must be well, when you're waiting for that to come into your inbox, I can imagine that must be an interesting time waiting to open that email and see how you've done.
Yes,
well, I guess
sometimes you get the happy dance too when you score well. So.
Sure, yes. I guess I get the celebration side as well. I won't ask you what kind of what your celebrations are, and if they're different to kind of when people score a touchdown. I guess one other area I wanted to move on to was outside of kind of your normal marketing and social media teams and even customer service. How do you engage kind of other executives on social media? So, for instance, I guess the C-suite at your company, if they're tweeting away, do you train them? Is it something that you'd want them to do more of? I'm interested to hear about how you work with kind of people that are representing the company outside of the marketing teams but still have their own social channels, and how they engage with customers. So, James, I'm going to come to you first. I'm guessing there's probably quite a set process for you with having such large teams that are on social. How do you approach kind of new team members and executives and kind of training them to be social ready?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of education, a lot of just best practices, and I think what really we should try to show is a lot of successes and case studies that show, okay, hey, this really worked well, and how do we better utilize that? And I think the other part of it is understanding, again, what are we trying to communicate out, and what's going to be the most effective way in doing it? Who's the right spokesperson? And then it goes back to your PR training that many of us have, is who's your spokesperson? Who's your key stakeholders that need to hear this message? And it's aligning that. So sometimes it's conversation around, okay, we need to get this out, but who's the right person to say this? And how do we best seed this? Because it's sometimes it's a little bit of that part of it, but we're trying to educate from the standpoint of really understanding the reach and impact that we have. When's our right messaging? And not only who's doing it, but what's the right time to do it? So again, going back to the PR kind of PR background that many of us have is, okay, when's that news cycle hit? Do you want to hit the news cycle? Do you want to hit the 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock news cycle? Or do you want to hit, and social has in many ways its own cycle. And what we see consistently is that there's a dead period from about 4:30 in the afternoon until about 6 o'clock. That's when people are driving home. They're not on social. So we tend not to put anything out in that time frame. But we also know where our sweet spots is later on in the evenings. That we'll try to consistently put things out, 7:30, because that really is where I get the most engagement at any other time when it's not the big news. I'll say it that way. But so it's a little bit of education of context. It goes to what Heather was saying earlier. It's context. It's understanding when to put that message out there, but who's going to say that too. And I think the other challenge that we have is that we also have a lot of ancillary accounts. So it could be our mascot account, could be our cheerleader account, could be, and we go through education processes of looking at what's the best practices that we want to engage, but then also give them the the range to be authentic and be organic with their content.
Okay, and we're running quite low on time, but I want to come to both Dave and Heather on the same question. Dave, at Farmers Insurance, are you encouraging your colleagues and other members, other employees to be on social and represent the company, or is that something you shy away from?
No, we absolutely encourage that. It's challenging because of the legal and compliance regulations that we're faced with, what they can actually say, but to, like in a very high-level, general sort of sense, represent the company and what we stand for and some of our values and community service and that sort of thing, absolutely.
Okay, great. And what just quickly on that, is it training you do with them on the regulatory side, or is it a case that they have to just get every tweet approved or every social post approved? How do you approach that, or is there a bit of both?
No, I guess it's a bit of both, but no, it's far more so training. Basically arming them with the guidelines for how they can craft their posts and what have you, and really some of the keywords to avoid that would trigger some sort of an audit. But really, I mean, that we're not utilizing like the broader employee base here as kind of like an extended sales force. It's more like just be yourself, be authentic, and then share what you do and be honest about it on social media, and let that sort of stand and speak for itself.
Okay, great. And Heather, finally coming to you, how do you find getting your employees and executive teams involved in social and Twitter and representing the Economist?
Well, for the most part, it's just how do you make it as easy for them as possible to share the information and share, what we're doing. So a lot of the times when we're launching new programs or new content, we ensure that we create those, we design social posts and shareable assets for employees so that they can easily share it. We find that actually gives a better return for us in terms of how many people are engaging with the content in market or within social. And so for us, it's really just making sure people have access to information. We also make sure our teams are up to date all the time on what's happening next on our platforms, and we do company-wide monthly calls on not only our own products, but on what's happening elsewhere. So, really keeping that strong relationship with the social media providers so that our teams are always aware of what's happening in the space. And I think that really helps not only, shape how we're shaping our programs and shaping our strategy internally, but how we're utilizing the platforms outside of our own day-to-day jobs.
There is one thing I want to chat on real quickly. So we have an agent base of about 13,000. So for them, we absolutely want them using social media to talk about the products. So to avoid some of the compliance risks, we have a tool that we've implemented called Hearsay, which is sort of a social media repository where if they use this sort of pre-approved content, we have libraries of it out there, then they can avoid the regulatory review process. So that's the one exception, the caveat is, when you want your employees acting as your sales force, as in agents, how do you avoid the risk, and having libraries of pre-approved content is how we've done that. And I thought it was important to throw out there because it's actually been a great tool for us because of some of the metrics that's come back through it. We can actually see what agents are sharing what kind of content and what the downstream effects of that has been. Like, for example, how many engagements, how many likes, how many people have commented, what those comments were. So that kind of repository, that tool has been huge for us. Sorry, just wanted to throw that out there.
No, that's great, and I'd definitely be interested to hear. Maybe at another time now, we're running low on time, but about how you keep that personalized touch, but at the same time, you're kind of using these pre-approved pieces of content that have been written by someone else and kind of are there to use in your library. But as I say, we probably have to talk about that another time as we're running towards the end of today's webinar. So I want to say thank you to everyone that submitted questions. Unfortunately, if I haven't got to yours, hopefully we know we can get to it next time, or feel free to email it to me and I can pass it on. And I'd of course like to thank James, Heather and Dave as well for their insights and contributions. So thank you guys, thanks for being part of the webinar. It's been some really interesting insights today. And before everyone leaves to get, I guess, your well-deserved coffee for getting through the webinar, just a quick reminder that we're going to be sending out the recordings early next week. So if you've missed anything, don't worry, that recording is going to be sent out, and feel free to share the recordings with the rest of your team as well. And what's more, James and Dave are going to be speaking alongside 50 other brands in New York in this June at the Corporate Social Media Summit. So if you have any more questions, there is an opportunity to ask them in person there. You can see on screen now some of the brands that will be speaking and sharing their best practice. And for more information, be sure to check out the brochure, which I'll link to is being sent into the chat box now. I'll also email it to you afterwards if you didn't get a chance to see it. And I'll also be emailing out some exclusive discount codes as well for everyone who joined the webinar. So yeah, hope to see you in New York for that as well, and please feel free to email any questions there. And again, one last thank you to our speakers. And yeah, I hope everyone has a great rest of the day, and I'll see you for the next Incite webinar soon. Thanks.